Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and we're going to talk about the new visual language that's being built for Dungeons & Dragons with LEGO. So, Dungeons & Dragons, and also, let me get the whole video idea concept out first. We're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons. We're going to talk about the new visual language that LEGO is bringing to Dungeons & Dragons, and we're going to talk about cultural pioneering. I have this... So, because of what I believe about Dungeons & Dragons, that Dungeons & Dragons is not a game, it's actually a human flourishment engine created by Gary Gygax, disguised and delivered as a game, but it's important, the purpose of Dungeons & Dragons, in my humble opinion, is literally to improve human evolution and human society at a base level. I think that was Gary's goal, right? I'm very unique, not a lot of people believe this, I'm not sure anybody else believes this. But I believe that Dungeons & Dragons is truly it's a transformative force in American society, and I also believe that America improves the world just because of what it is, right? Like Lincoln, Harriet Tubman, George Washington, and Gary Gygax. Like America improves the world because America is what America is. Peak human. I'm not gonna apologize for that. I'm not gonna pretend that's not true. It is. We're crushing it. We lead the world, literally and figuratively, right? Like, let's stop pretending, right? Like, why does Russell Brand live in Britain and talk more about American politics than British politics? Because American politics affect the entire world, right? So basically, I believe that dungeon masters are cultural pioneers that are farther out and discussing things decades before regular humans begin and discuss the same things, right? So I truly believe that dungeon masters are the cultural pioneers for humanity, right? So, and LEGO, because it's now officially connected to Dungeons & Dragons. Dungeons & Dragons, LEGO, these are one product, right? Every single LEGO set that's ever been built has now been connected to Dungeons & Dragons, which does nothing but tell stories, right? And I think LEGO connected their worlds so that every single LEGO set that has ever been created will stop being a foolish little toy on a shelf and begin being a storytelling engine, right? The second LEGO Dragon's Keep Journey's End was announced, right? LEGO and D&D became one product in my humble opinion, right? And so LEGO is now officially connected to Dungeons & Dragons, and Dungeons & Dragons is now officially connected to LEGO. And I'm begging you, please open your eyes, because what's at stake is tremendous, right? And Dungeons & Dragons, because of how it was structured, everything that attaches to it transforms immediately and changes, right? And everything that's connected to Dungeons & Dragons, the moment it's connected to Dungeons & Dragons has changed forever. Dungeons & Dragons has changed forever from the Magic the Gathering, Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth set. It will never be the same, right? Like, no Dungeon Master will ever run the same game. Oh, unless they're a non-podium Dungeon Master, right? By the way, Dungeons & Dragons. Podium Dungeons & Dragons, non-podium Dungeons & Dragons. Yeah, you ran the race, you came in 7th or 4th, nobody cares, right? You got the bronze, you got the silver, you got the gold. And also, I care a lot about, like, I used to say Tier 1 Dungeons & Dragons, right? But I'm not going to pretend. There's a Dungeon Master in this world who's better than me. It's Matthew Mercer. He's done everything I've talked about. He's literally transformed the lives of every single player at his table. Orion Akaba, he destroyed that man. And is destroying him every single day. Shoving him deeper into an abyss of shame, right? And then Laura Bailey, Travis Willingham, Sam Riegel, he's making the millionaire stars kings and queens, right? He uses Dungeons & Dragons not to transform his own life and impact the culture he's in, but to make millionaires, kings, and celebrities, right? The idea that Dungeons & Dragons is a game is ludicrous. Matthew Mercer has already proven that you can make your friends millionaires with Dungeons & Dragons alone and nothing else. Nothing else, right? Like, so the greatest Dungeons & Dragons, the gold medal Dungeon Master in the world right now is Matthew Mercer. Oh, and if he didn't beat me enough with just his stream game, he also has canon D&D hardbacks. He's a D&D canon author. By the way, Matthew Mercer isn't in competition with Dungeons & Dragons. He literally wrote Dungeons & Dragons, right? As every single day that you could legally buy, right? Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, Matthew Mercer is not competing with Dungeons and Dragons, right? He's literally part of Dungeons and Dragons, right? He is bound into its success, right? And until he renounces those books and asks for them never to be sold again, he's part of Dungeons and Dragons, right? He's not some competitor of Dungeons and Dragons. He's literally a D&D canon author with a book due. With a book due, okay? All right. So one, thanks for your patience. Let me get to where I'm at, right? So I'm running Dungeons and Dragons. I'm running Lego Dungeons and Dragons. And by the way, you talking to Scott Garibay, baby. I am deeper out. I am farther out on this branch, and the branch is bending down. I am farther on the 1 hour Lego branch than anybody in the world. I'm farther on D&D Lego than anyone in the world. I'm running multiple campaigns right now using Lego D&D, right? I'm ahead of the curve, and I'm at the front of the pack. Trust and believe, okay? So here's what I want to talk about today. Let me get you all the way there, okay? Dungeons and Dragons has always been decades ahead of the curve, right? In 1974, Gary Gygax actually solved gender identity, right? Like men came to Gary and was like, I'm a man, but my character, what gender are they? And he's like, whatever gender you want, right? Gary Gygax settled gender identity questions in 1974. There are spaces today in America where gender identity is debated, and they don't know what Gary settled in 1974. Dungeon Masters are literally 48 years ahead of the conversation, right? Like, there are parts of America where you can go right now, and they don't know what Gary determined and declared in 1974 for gender identity. Okay? You follow me here, right? We are farther out on cultural questions than anyone. Lego makes it deeper, okay? Something is happening with the visual language that Lego allows for Dungeons and Dragons, which makes the game run faster, but also makes the cultural questions deeper, okay? So I'm running Dragonlance Shadow Dragon Queen. I'm running it for 2 separate groups. This last week, I put Mayor Raven Uth Vogler. She is a African-American female leader in Dungeons and Dragons in a D&D canon hardback. I put her on the table, and I was running it for a second group, and I had to pull the barred guitar out of the pink... Okay, guess what is the best D&D miniatures in the world right now? It's the LGBTQ Pride set from Legos. Everyone is awesome. It literally has every single minifig in straight colors across the board. And you could easily depict a woman by putting a pink minifig on the board. And I've been doing this again and again and again. And what I and the reason why is so many traditionally leaders have been male that I thought, okay, well, I'll just depict this female leader by putting a pink minifig up. And I realized that was not the best thing to do because Cudgel Ironsmile was then put up. She is a dwarf ironclad regiment leader. Okay? You following this? Which means that I needed a second pink mini, right? But there was already a pink mini being used for a player character, and I ran out of pink minis to represent female leaders in Dungeons & Dragons. Now, first of all, that's a lot of progress, right? There's so many strong female independent leaders in Dungeons & Dragons in a D&D canon hardback that you don't have enough pink minifigs, right? So what I should have done is I have a fish token. I could have put a blue minifig down, right? And put a fish in her hand saying, hey, this is Raven Uth Vogler. She has a fish in her hand because she's the mayor of a fishing village named Vogler, right? But I didn't represent her correctly. I just said she's a female, she's pink. I didn't misgender her, right? I didn't represent her independently. I didn't represent her with representation based on who she was and how she operates, right? Now, what's astounding about this is previously, before we had Legos, this didn't matter. And the reason why was you would just get the miniature you needed. You would get a Raven Uth Vogler miniature, right? Or you would get, and basically the other thing is people didn't worry too. They were like, oh, hey, this troll miniature is actually this person, right? And they didn't put any visual aspects or visual clues to differentiate. They didn't differentiate with miniatures because miniatures couldn't differentiate. But now we get to a new era in Dungeons and Dragons, right? Because now with Legos, if you are using those sad sack old minis that are just representing, that have no ability to change, right? They're just what they were printed as. You can't put an item into their hand. You can't put different hair on them. You can't change their face from a frown to a smile, right? You can't show that they dual wield because they hold two swords, but now they're only single wielding because they dropped one, right? If you are one of these non-podium, old school, ridiculous, used non-changeable miniatures, right? One, you're behind. Get good. Catch up. Lego easily defeats your multi-$1,000 miniature sets. Right? You don't know it. I do, because I'm farther out, because I follow Dungeons and Dragons. I don't just keep doing what's comfortable, right? And I got a crap ton of stuff that no longer has value to me because I've switched over to what is official Dungeons and Dragons. Lego is official Dungeons and Dragons. Your miniatures are sad sack slow and do not represent the cultural speed of Dungeons and Dragons. So now, when you look at a character, right, are you representing them in the game world with the voice that you use? Are you representing them correctly? Are you being respectful to them as an African American? Are you being respectful to them as a female character? Are you being respectful to them from the culture of their region in Dungeons & Dragons? But even more than this, we had already had the discussion of, when you describe Ravenuth-Vogler, right, do you describe her as a person and be respectful? Or do you go, oh, this is what her cleavage looks like. You got it wrong. You did it wrong, right? So not just all the representations in the game world, but what representation are you making on the board, right? The physical representation, the miniature. You used to not have options. Now you do, and you need to think about what you're doing, and there's a cultural question, right? I learned I did it wrong, right? I represented Mayor Ravenuth-Vogler wrong. I was like, lady woman, leader, pink. I was wrong. She's the leader of a fishing village. She should have been a purple fig with a fish in her hand, right? But I didn't think about her, right? And the way I think about Mayor Ravenuth-Vogler is the way I think about women all over. And now D&D is saying, stop, think. What is this woman? What is she as a person? What is every single aspect of her? Can you see her more as her gender, right? And this has always been at Dungeons & Dragons at some level. But there's literally a new level, right? And you don't know that you are doing things wrong with your physical representation because you don't realize how much things have changed. Lego being official to Dungeons & Dragons means that if you are using non-changing miniatures, you are making a choice to get visual representation on the table wrong. You're doing it wrong. Every single word of that is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking, subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.